This is an RNZ podcast.
They say life is stranger than fiction.
You know, an individual ant can walk across water due to the surface tension. These ants swarm together rapidly, latch onto each other with their mandibles, and create this floating raft of
Antness.
stinging potential. Yeah. And that's a fact. That's a terrifying fact.
But sometimes what we see in movies or read in books is so incredible, it obviously couldn't be possible. Or could it?
They're creating these horrifying sort of hybrid robot cockroaches.
Really? To do what?
Oh, you'd have to ask those Silicon Valley guys.
I'm Brian Crump and welcome to Sci Fi, Sci Fact. This is a podcast where we take science fiction's strangest ideas, weirdest elements, and most unfeasible plot drivers and explore if they actually could happen. Maybe they already have. And in every episode, we bring in a scientist from New Zealand's McDiarmid Institute to explain the theories behind some of fiction's more fantastic flights of fancy. In this episode, we are teasing out what is plausible about Antman, a superhero, a comic hero. I think he might come from the same family as Iron Man or Captain America, but I'm about to find out, who can shrink to the size of an ant, and then he can communicate with ants. Now, is anything about that likely, possible, can be explained by rational science? Mike Price is taking on the challenge. He's a McDiarmid-affiliated lecturer in physics and chemistry at Victoria University, Wellington.
A soldier the size of an insect. The ultimate secret weapon.
Scott, you're different. Be skillful, agile, fast. I need you to be the Antman.
Makes sense.
Awesome.
Antman, does he come from one of those big comic worlds? Marvel?
Yeah, he's a Marvel guy.
He is a guy?
He's been around, I think, since the 60s in the comics. I actually haven't read the comics, but I've watched the two recent Ant-Man films.
Good on you. So, am I right? He can shrink himself down to the size of an ant, which is useful if you want to hide, and he can control armies of actual ants. That seems like, well, how can he speak ant? But let's start with the first thing, the actual physically shrinking in size. We can't do that, can we? There's no way we could ever do that, could we?
Well, yeah, I should sort of be upfront and state that of all the sci-fis and sci-facts that you may have talked to, Ant-Man, I would put him out there as being one of the most implausible. Because when you kind of get down to the actual physics of it, the rationale is that he shrinks by means of these Pym particles. They're invented by Hank Pym, a bit of a genius, obviously.
Hank Pym. And his amazing Pym particle. That's a good bit of alliteration you got right there, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, the writers, how do they come up with this?
They're having a ball. They're having a ball, and good on them.
Oh, they have a lot of fun with Ant-Man. They work by changing the distance between atoms while being able to maintain or increase the density and strength of the atoms. So not only can Ant-Man shrink to the size of an ant, but he retains the strength of a full-grown man while he's an ant. And that means that he can really kick people's butts.
Okay, this is the first alarm bell that's ringing in my head, and it's the opposite of what you just said. Don't insects, given their size, have far greater strength than humans? Why would I want to be a puny human when he's the size of an ant? When look what ants can carry. Look how far fleas can jump. Look how far bumblebees can fly. Those are superhuman at the size they are, aren't they?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. But Ant-Man is as strong as an 80-kilogram guy. So,
I see. So he can pick up a guy that's still full size at his ant size and throw that guy across a room.
Yeah. I mean, and I think in the films he mostly punches them. But the problem is that force is a change of momentum, which from your high school physics, momentum is mass times velocity, or you think of it as kinetic energy as mass times the square of the velocity, but they're linearly proportional to the mass. So if he has that mass to be able to whack people, then he must be incredibly dense. And you can do kind of a quick calculation, and it astounded me how dense he would have to be. He becomes sort of close to the density of a white dwarf star.
Good heavens. Not quite a neutron star,
Mass.
but getting there.
Getting there, on the way to a white dwarf star. So, if you think of, probably most people will have picked up a chunk of lead, which is sort of 11,000 kilograms per meter cubed density. Osmium is sort of the densest naturally occurring element. That's 22,000 kilograms per meter cubed. Antman, when he's a small little guy, he will be 30,000 times denser than that, 600 million kilograms per meter cubed, give or take.
And given we are what 85%, 90% water, and if he's going to function as a human, even if he's smaller, he's going to need water, isn't he? Because water's the medium of exchange. He can't be that dense, can he? He could be smart, but not that dense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure how he has a little helmet, so that kind of helps him breathe, I think. And maybe he's often not that small for that long, so maybe he doesn't need to worry about eating and drinking. But we try and look at the fact of this. Are there some creative ways that we could shrink something while maintaining density? And people have suggested there's a whole literature on the physics of Antman. You need to get into a bit of particle physics, replacing the electrons with
quantum mechanics again.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, things get pretty intense.
Does part of them go into another universe, maybe?
Well, yeah, that's one of the suggestions, that somehow the mass is being transferred into another dimension. Another suggestion is that you could literally just, if you could locally change Planck's constant, which have you heard of Planck's constant?
I have heard of it, but I couldn't say I understand it.
It's just the smallest length allowable, and it's one of the fundamental constants of our universe. It's a very, 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 very small length, but it crops up in all the equations and things. And if you just changed that, then the atoms would be, the electrons would be closer to the protons, to the nucleus, and you would be smaller. But there probably would be devastating consequences for the rest of the universe if you could locally change this Planck's constant. So I'd rather not do that.
I mean, would you suddenly have some kind of black hole situation that would be centered on Antman?
I honestly couldn't say. I couldn't say what would happen if you could change Planck's constant. This is where, Antman, I think, is the most powerful of all these superhero guys. Put him up against Superman, he'll run rings around them because he's like a god, changing these fundamental constants. The problem is he would kind of sink through the ground a lot.
Yes.
But
I was thinking of another way around this, because you talked about his ability to punch a human, and when he lands a punch on a human, to the human it would feel, a full-size human, it would feel like the human was being punched by a full-size bloke. But if the force of a punch is also dependent on the velocity that the fist is travelling when it hits the nose, couldn't you achieve the same punch if you could throw your fist much, much faster than we humans can normally?
Yeah, you might. I mean, the problem is, so right now we're operating under the assumption that he is as dense as a white dwarf. So if he threw that punch, you wouldn't feel like you'd been punched. You would have been sort of shot through with a needle. But if he was a normal density, and if he was as light as an ant and managed to get his fist up to an enormous velocity, you would be spreading the force out over a larger area, because he would be going so fast that I think you'd be heating the air up So actually, no, it wouldn't feel like a punch. It would be, I think you'd be burnt. It'd be like an explosion.
Would it? Would it feel? I mean, what kind of speeds are we talking? Supersonic speeds to get that kind of force through this little ant-sized fist?
I'd have to sit down and work it out for 5 minutes. So it's to be sure, but I would think easily supersonic.
Is there any reason why we couldn't have been smaller, us humans, given how small atoms are? Couldn't we have been much smaller and still do what we do? If our brains were the size of an ant's brain, but if we'd evolved in a certain way, would that still be sufficient grey matter to be human?
Wow. Deep question.
Yeah, well, you're going to talk about ant-sized humans packing a punch with a full-sized human and being denser than yellow white dwarfs or whatever. Of course I'm going to throw back some stuff at you.
I think our brains would have to become correspondingly more efficient. They would have to be a lot more efficient. You know, they're already remarkable pieces of engineering, or, you know, that you've got a 3-dimensional computational network of neurons. But I think with current biology, we would struggle. It would be really tough for us to have that level of intelligence with sort of the current biology of the brain if it was that small.
Okay, because what I'm sort of saying here, Mike, is that is our evolution, our size, just a result of the chances of evolution? If we throw in the dice, the evolutionary dice, another time, we might have come up with not super intelligent, because we are not super intelligent, but a being capable of creating technology that was the size of an ant.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I think that's not outlandish. I mean, the whole thing we're sort of getting into, it's a really interesting topic, is about scaling laws and how they apply to biology. You know, like why can an ant not be the size of a human? Why is there a fundamental kind of limit to how big animals can get? You know, the dinosaurs were massive, but why couldn't they get any bigger? And that's to do with just these scaling laws, you know, the fact that mass increases in three dimensions, you know, by a factor of cubed, but the surface area and the muscles that support us is due to this sort of the square, you know, the area, so that they're different. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's about those dimensions, and they have sort of profound impacts on what creatures are possible at the micro level compared to at our levels. And I think we happen to be in a quite happy medium-sized place, I would say.
For whatever reason, our brains evolved and we developed this hand-eye coordination, and then we developed an ability to make tools, but we also developed memory, and we knew about storing things and knowing where they were and going back and getting them. And all these things allowed us to start to cheat or to outdo our physical limitations. I mean, we're not that fast. We're not that strong. We're pretty clever social animals, so we can work as a team, but then so can wolves or hyenas or dolphins. But we developed technology that meant we could become stronger and more dangerous than we otherwise would have been. But maybe something at a much smaller scale in a different evolutionary story could have done the same thing.
I mean, I was thinking, you know, along these lines. I mean, the ants are evolutionarily speaking very successful, and thinking about, you know, intelligence doesn't need to be entirely contained within one brain. The ants have a sort of collective intelligence and power. You know, in the movies, he learns to control the ants by making his thoughts precise.
Solenopsis mandibularis.
Known for their bite, the fire ants have evolved into remarkable architects. They are handy to get you in and out of difficult places.
They're not listening to me.
You have to clear your mind, Scott. You have to make your thoughts precise. That's how it works. Open your eyes and just think about what you want the ants to do.
Antman has a little device that he sticks on his head, and that enables him to stimulate the olfactory nerves of the ants. Some kind of electromagnetic radiation.
Well, see, you've come to that other question, which is he's shrunk to the size, he's a human the size of an ant, and somehow he ends up not being so dense that he falls through the floor. But not only that, now he can talk to the ants, and he's not Dr. Dolittle. So you're saying he's using it with smell?
Well, he's kind of bypassing smell. He's communicating to them with the nerves that the ants would use as part of their smell sense, if that makes sense. So he's not having to send out ant pheromones. He's sending out electromagnetic radiation. I think if you wanted to do this in real life, you'd need a very, very powerful transmitter. But yeah, he's sort of talking to them through the language of smell, according to the movie. And I can't attest to whether this is fact or fiction. The ants are very loyal and brave.
Right. How plausible is this then, Mike? If I could talk to the ants as opposed to the animals?
I think engineers are sort of controlling cockroaches and things already. So
really? What are they doing?
It's not outrageous. How are they doing it?
Because I'd like a few tips on controlling cockroaches.
If you wanted to do it this way, it'd be very expensive. I think they're putting little electrodes. They're creating these horrifying sort of hybrid robot cockroaches.
Really? To do what?
Oh, you'd have to ask those Silicon Valley guys.
Okay, right. But
that's definitely not my area.
Okay, a little electrodes in the cockroaches to modify the behavior in some way. I would have thought they'd be using some kind of smell thing or olfactory thing with insects. Is there any evidence of us humans controlling insects in any way, apart from just a straight-out repellent kind of thing? You put some stuff on your skin and the mosquitoes fly away kind of stuff.
You can attract sandflies. I've noticed I have this ability. My wife is really excellent at doing this, actually. Attracting sandflies. That's one way. That's a degree of control. Maybe not the one we want, but there's a lot of options there.
I guess wanting to attract sandflies doesn't sound that useful as a human, as opposed to some kind of control of insects that might be useful. Beyond what they're doing in Silicon Valley, did you come across anything else in your research, Mike?
They go through some of the, there's a lot of different ant species, and he talks about Paratrichina longicornis, which is known as crazy ants.
Paratrichina longicornis, commonly known as crazy ants. They're lightning fast and can conduct electricity, which makes them useful to fry out enemy electronics.
Oh, you're not so crazy. Hey, you're cute.
So in the movie, this is kind of depicted as these ants, somehow acting like electric eels, but in reality, these crazy ants, they don't create their own burrows, so they search out warm, dry places, which happens to be sort of electronics a lot, and then they're creating these shorts because you get so many of them, and then they create an electrical short. And they'll get zapped, and that creates this stress response, which brings more of those ants, and so suddenly your air conditioning system is completely overwhelmed. The other thing that you might see in the movie are the fire ants, and they're depicted as these incredible architects and builders, and that is true. They have horrible stings, but they can make these rafts on water because they're quite hydrophobic. An individual ant can walk across water due to the surface tension. These ants swarm together rapidly, latch onto each other with their mandibles, and create this floating raft of
antness,
stinging potential. Yeah. And that's a fact. That's a terrifying fact, but really fascinating. And people are really interested, even engineers and physicists, material scientists like me, in the materials properties of these sort of balls of ants you get, because sometimes it acts like a liquid and sometimes it will act like a solid or a springy thing or a fabric.
But now to take things in a different direction, let's go back to the 1950s.
Yes, cities, nations, even civilization itself, threatened with annihilation, because in one moment of history making violence, nature, mad, rampant, wrought its most awesome creation. For born in that swirling inferno of radioactive dust were things so horrible, so terrifying, so hideous. There is no word to describe them.
Them? No, I haven't.
It's a great movie. It came out of the whole sort of Cold War paranoia. I think it was a 1950s movie. And the premise is nuclear testing, ants, probably in the Nevada desert, and the ants' radioactivity means they grow, they mutate, and they're now 6 foot long. And, you know, they're horrible. It's them. Them is coming. And but physically, if an ant was that big, would it be crushed by its own exoskeleton or something like that?
Yeah, so its legs wouldn't be able to support it because the weight has increased by a factor of, say it's increased by 10 times, then the weight will have increased by a factor of 10 cubed, or so 1,000. But the strength of the legs, which is proportional to the cross-section, will have only increased by a factor of 100. So it would be stuck. Its legs wouldn't work. But the main thing is it would suffocate because of the way that insects breathe. You know, they don't have lungs. Basically, the oxygen just sort of diffuses into their bodies and is sort of pumped around a little bit by the motion of their limbs a little bit, but they don't have dedicated lungs or gills that pump the air in and out.
Do ants have hearts?
I don't think so. I mean, they have some internal organs.
I mean, they seem pretty cold, you know. They've got no emotion, these ants. Maybe Ant-Man's ants do have emotion, but mostly they're portrayed as not having a lot of emotion.
They are loyal and brave. There's an ant called Antony in the film.
You kidding, right?
No.
Anthony
but that's
Ant.
actually that's something that there's fiction, because the ants in the film would all be females. Most of the ants you see will be females. They're the soldiers, the workers. The male ants are just these sort of little pathetic things that stay close to the queen and mate with them, and that's kind of it.
And then they die when they sort of ran out of sperm or something.
I guess so.
Yeah, I guess so. Right.
But I don't want to judge them too harshly.
No, well, you know, it's maybe not such a bad life servicing the queen all day. So a 6 foot ant is going to struggle. It's going to struggle to breathe. It's going to struggle to support its own weight. Why is it then? And again, you touched on this way back, or maybe I did, but why is it that, say, a flea? Why can a flea jump so much higher than its own height, but nothing the size of us can?
Yeah, it comes back to that kind of same point in terms of the scaling of mass versus cross-sectional strength of the legs. That's why, you know, an elephant will struggle even more to jump. And, you know, comparatively, these little creatures, you know, compared to their size, they're a lot quicker as well. They have less inertia, so they can change directions much more easily. And that comes back to that momentum relation that, you know, I talked about. Your momentum is just directly proportional to your mass, and same with your inertia. So you have a lower mass, it's a little flea, it can jump really high, it can change direction, zap around.
There must also be some energy efficiency equations that go on. As the energy needed to just keep going. If you need more energy than you can consume just to keep going, you're not going to keep going, are you? You're going to die.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, this is why small things, they have this really high metabolism. So if actually we talked about Ant-Man eating and drinking, I think people have worked it out. He'd actually need to be eating about once every hour in order to keep up that level of activity.
Right. And when we say eat, what do you mean? A Snickers bar or something a bit more substantial?
Quite a lot. You need to proportionately eat a lot more the smaller you get. I mean, this is, you know, hummingbirds need to feed constantly, don't they?
Of course, if you shrank full-size Ant-Man down to ant size, if he's just had a meal, he's going to drown in his own meal, isn't he?
I think his meal gets shrunk as well.
Really?
I mean, you get this is in Ant-Man 2.
What happens? I mean, is there some kind of gamma ray or something that shrinks him? What actually triggers the shrinking? How does he control it?
Oh, he presses a button on his suit.
Red shrinks, blue enlarges.
Okay, and what do we think? What do we think the button's doing?
I'd go with the other dimension argument. I think these arguments about creating these sort of, maybe you could create some exotic atoms using muons instead of electrons, or creating denser isotopes. You can think of ways where you can make things a lot more dense while keeping the chemistry the same. But as we talked about before, you start getting into these crazy situations. So I think there must be some other dimension involved.
And if he was size of an ant, I'm guessing, does he keep his same voice even though he's now, 1,000th or somewhere between 1,000th and 100th of his original size? Does he still sound the same?
Well, in the films he does, but in reality, the frequencies of our voices and they're dependent upon the wavelengths of our vocal cords. How long our vocal cords are. So this is why a bass, a double bass, or a cello needs to be really long. That gives you your sort of deeper notes, whereas a violin is shorter. And so you've shrunk his vocal cords down to very, very small lengths. So I've actually, maybe it will carry over Zoom, but I've got a little demonstration of what he would sound like.
Have you? Really? Is this your own voice or the actor's voice?
I've been practicing this for a long time.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready. That sounds like a squeaky old Matchbox toy.
Yeah, that's actually a mouse. He would actually sound.
What, a mouse? A real mouse?
Yeah, it's a real mouse. He would sound higher pitched than that.
Really?
Yeah.
Where'd you get the real mouse from? Have you got a pet mouse?
I've been training a mouse to speak.
Now, Mike, if that's true, then, Mike, we need to move this to prime time. We can't bury this story. Mike Price communicates with mice. Forget about communicating with ants. Mike's got a mouse.
If only.
Oh, never mind. Anyway, you make the point. You make the point. It actually just shows you that there is another horror movie from the 50s that did get it right.
It isn't like any other fly I've ever seen.
The fly is on its way. Watch out for it. It's far beyond anything your mind could ever conceive.
The Fly. Have you seen that? The original one.
The one with Jeff Goldblum.
No. That's the remake. That's the remake. The original one starred Vincent Price. Vincent Price, and at the end, the body of the human is connected to the head of the human is connected to the body of the fly, and guess what? It's caught in the spider's web, and he calls out, "Help me, help me," with a very high-pitched voice. They got that right.
Wait in the house. There's a good boy for you.
But that's for another sci-fi, Sci Fact, that one. Finally, Mike, what would happen having shrunk down to ant size, somehow managing to not fall through the floor, managing to communicate with other ants, managing not to sound like a mouse but sound like a human still? What would happen when Ant-Man scaled back to human size again?
Well, all he needs to do is press the button and he's back. Right,
okay. Yeah, but Mike, is that plausible? Okay. You're talking about the sci-fi. What about the Sci Fact here, Mike? Would he come back hideously deformed?
He would have to sort of borrow that mass that the Pym particles have shunted off into this other dimension. He'd have to take it back. And in the sequels, he can make himself giant as well, which that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, I bet it is.
I mean, you'd be extremely disoriented when he's down ant size. His eyes aren't working very well because his eyes are sort of close to the diffraction limit of light. That's why insect eyes look so different to human eyes. So I think he would be disoriented. He would probably feel quite ill, depending on what happened to that meal you were talking about before. I mean, in reality, he would have been squished because he was a white dwarf for a period there. But, he seems to do all right on it. He can do it very quickly. He's an ant. He's a man. He's Antman.
It does remind me of a story from them when I think the director was talking to the special effects guy and was asking how the giant ants were coming along. And the special effects guy said, "Oh, they're going all right." And the director said, "But do they look real? Do they look real?" And the special effects guy said, "Well, as real as any 6-foot ant can be." So, maybe that's where we leave Ant-Man. Lots of fun, but in terms of plausibility, it's not a pass. What do you think, Mike?
I would say that he is one of the most fantastical superheroes you'll ever come across.
Very diplomatically put there, Mike.
No problem. I don't want to offend any ants or Ant-Men.
Dr. Mike Price, McDiarmid Institute and Rutherford Discovery Fellow at Victoria University of Wellington, discussing the plausibility of the Marvel Comics character Ant-Man.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Yeah, it's a real pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sci Fi, Sci Fact, hosted by me, Brian Crump, produced by Andrew Robertson, and of course, made possible thanks to the incredible knowledge of those brilliant scientists at the McDiarmid Institute. You can find more episodes of Sci Fi, Sci Fact on the RNZ podcast page. RNZ's podcasts are also available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify and iHeartRadio, or pretty much wherever you find your podcasts. And make sure to follow us so you don't miss out on any new episodes.